Whenever James Foley, the US journalist, was beheaded, and it was filmed, and it was sent to Western governments, there was a massive, massive outcry. It was ridiculous, people said. It was absolutely inhumane to think that people could stoop to such a level to behead another human being. However, I'm here to prove to you today why I feel that actually paying ransoms to these terrorists is not the way to solve such a heartbreaking issue. I will look at this by addressing, firstly, 2 points. One, why governments paying ransoms will only play into the terrorists' hands. Secondly, why this will only exacerbate the issues that already exist. I will then give a counter-argument before going on to give an overall conclusion to my speech. Okay, so firstly, why would governments play into terrorists' hands if they did give them ransoms? We think that the money, if they did pay them, could fund for a huge amount of future terrorist efforts. We see that as terrorists are extremely greedy in that respect, and they know that they are preying on the West because they have, for example, a family member as a hostage, and they are in high demand. We think therefore this means that they realise that they can ask for vast amounts of money. We'll look at the example of the Somalian pirates escapade a few years ago. I'm seeing that a British couple was captured off the coast of Somalia, and then the terrorists asked for the government to pay £150 million. We think if the UK government had decided to pay that £150 million, that could have funded a whole amount, that would have funded a gigantic amount of future terrorist efforts, such as, for example, building bombs, encouraging more people to join their desire and join their forces. We don't think it's very good for the Western governments to be looking to condone the effect on terror. We don't think it's very good for Western governments to be supporting them and actually providing funds for future efforts that are actually only could potentially harm the people in their societies in the future anyway. So therefore we think that on that reason it's bad. We also think that it makes the West look weak. Why? We think that if they're succumbing to terrorists and making them as if they are doing, and like the governments are doing exactly what the terrorists would like them to do, we think this ultimately gives the impression that they are weak. We think it ultimately gives the impression that they have no strong desires to think for themselves and will do anything and are desperate in order to get that hostage back. We don't think that's a very good message to put across to terrorism, especially when it's such a serious global issue that could potentially harm vast numbers of innocent civilians. Okay, so secondly, why would this only exacerbate the issues that already exist? We see that the current issue of terrorism is not just a one box is ticked and suddenly it's finished. We think that terrorism is an extremely complex issue with a variety of fragments and a variety of very deep networks. We think that by simply paying one ransom, you aren't going to discourage the majority of terrorists of Al-Qaeda to suddenly stop working. You're not going to encourage all the members of Islamic State to suddenly give up on their own pursuing their ambitions. We see that if you give one ransom, we think it may or may not free that hostage, but it won't actually solve the long-term issue, and if anything, it can make it worse. We also see that because their desires are to create an Islamic State, that is their long-term goal. We think that paying a ransom will only deal with that specific short-term goal, and actually by giving them money could give them more opportunity to make the problem even harder to solve in the future for these Western governments. We also think that as this is a religious idea in terms of Islamic State and ISIS in the current situation, we think that people are not going to forget their religion. We think if their religion is so strong to them, they are not going to give up. We think that they are not going to simply give up on their pursuit and their desire. So therefore we think that this effort is only going to continue. We also see that terrorism is a global effort. We think following on from 9/11, this was the first major terrorist attack that occurred whenever the Twin Towers blew up and loads and loads of people died. I think about 2,000 people died overall due to the attacks that happened on that fateful day. We think that it's therefore a vast global effort, and by one country succumbing to terrorists, it therefore condemns the entirety of the West. And we think that because it is such a serious issue, that is a negative thing. Okay, so we think there are some people that say that, we need our families back. We need our family members back. We need those who we love to return to us because they have been captured by Islamic State. To that, ladies and gentlemen, I say that there is absolutely no guarantee that the terrorists will even agree to that. We think that because they hold the high ground and they actually have the hostage, they have the prisoner. If the Western government, for example the UK, does pay a ransom in order to free, for example, David Haynes, who was an aid worker that was captured. We think there's absolutely no guarantee that they will simply turn around and say, okay, I'm going to give you back your hostage, because at the end of the day, they are the ones in the power situation, ladies and gentlemen. We think that there is no guarantee this would happen. Why is this specifically harmful? We think this gives false hope to incredibly traumatized families, like David Haynes' mother, giving a really emotional plea to the BBC, crying and pleading for Islamic State to give her her husband back. But we think that therefore, give her her son back. And we think that therefore, this will only keep further emotional trauma on these families that are already being negatively impacted. We also look at the example of the 1972 Munich Olympic Games, whenever the governments offered to pay a ransom for the Israeli athletes that were kidnapped, but then, before they even got around to paying the ransom, these hostages were killed anyway. We think terrorists are incredibly brutal people and will go to any means to achieve their desire. So therefore, even if you do give them what they want, they will simply not listen. We think it's very possible they will simply not do and complete the other side of the bargain. And so because we feel that terrorism is an incredibly complex issue, and so therefore it requires a complex solution, we think by giving them money, it could, one, fund future terrorist efforts, two, it won't solve the long-term issues, and thirdly, it could impose further trauma on already grief-stricken families. We think it's too late to save those who have fallen to the enemy. We think terrorism should be solved in another way other than paying ransoms. Thank you.